5 in the position 5 would be 150, always 1.5 times this. And position number 8 is 200, twice as the first note. And I'm going to show you that right now in one of the scales by the tar. Oh, by the way, then I'll introduce you the instruments also, which is history of instruments are by itself, 2-3 volume books. However, this, suppose this is actually 130, but let's say this is 100. Then you have this is the basis that we are talking about. Number 1, number 4, number 5, 8. This is the whole scale. And when you come to the number 8, then you are double frequency. Now, the building that we are making has 8 stories, and every story have the same kind of whatever you pick on the notes that you want, except for those 4 that's already fixed. Except that as you go up, every frequency is double. As you go down, every frequency is half. So upstairs to the note that you saw would be this one. The whole thing would be, first one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We are now we experience the same building, 2 different levels. You can go up to 7 for our hearing, which is in the piano scale. Can we go to the next? Okay, now, how do we find how to pick the other 2, or the other 2 in this wall, 2 other 2 on that wall? How do we do that? It's based on what's called a natural frequency phenomenon. If you double the frequency of your first note, let's say it was C1, was 100 supposedly, then when you double it, instead of 1 wave, you have 2 waves. When you triple it, you have 3 waves, 4, 5, and 6, and so forth. And when you do that, can we go to the next slide, please? When you do that 16 times, all the notes on the scale would show themselves in different stories of the building. And then you bring them all down together, then you find all the notes that creates a scale by just doubling the first, tripling 4, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. This is the way that you pick what other notes are there in the scale, and then which one do you want to use. Next one, please. Eventually, when you do this through our hearing, we can hear from what's called a C0. This is the 7, actually it made it 8 here, but it's really, most of the instruments in orchestra use 7 story, not 8. This goes a little bit lower than what we hear in 2000, but by 16. And then they actually stop somewhere around 20,000. So this is the whole note that you can get anywhere with all these levels. Can we go to the next one, please? And if you put those piano and put all the notes, frequencies on top of it, that's exactly how you have all the scales made. Next, please. So, there is another element about sensitivity I'm going to bypass because we had some technical issues at the beginning and we have less time to play for you. But just to understand that you can divide this to 24 equal pieces and then pick either 2 notes in this, whichever you want, 2 notes in that, whichever you want, and try. And whichever feels better, you keep it. Whichever doesn't feel good, you throw it away. So, one of the differences in Western and Eastern is that you have 12, which each 2 of them are put together as the smallest amount that exists in Western. For us, each one of them exists. So we have 24, scale of 24, but you guys have, the Western countries follow a scale of 12 notes. among the same thing. So you divide the whole area by 12, we divide it by 24. So we have some notes in between those notes that you're not using. So it gives more possible colorful creations. But again, if you're not tuned to it and you don't have the coding, it's going to be hard to decode it again. You get the message or feeling. So how we get to this is really, if you pay attention to what's the smallest sound that you can hear the difference, like this. Sorry. If you can hear the difference between these two, just by moving my finger a little bit higher, I can increase the tension and change the frequency. You can hear those two. That's what we usually refer to as the smallest amount, which is in santoor, is about 0. In coma is 5, coma which is almost about 10 santoor, 10 times of. They put a person in the lab and try to see what's the sensitivity of the frequency you have. Is 1,000 over 1,001, and log of that is 0.04, and that is the unit for Professor Savard from France created that unit for the sensitivity of the hear. For the music part, our sensitivity is 1/10 of that, and it's called 5 coma. So if you divide the whole area from 1 to 8, there's going to be 301 santoor, 301 pieces that you can differentiate from each other. Now in that 301, you can divide it by 12. You are going to get 25 equal Western classical scales. You can divide it by 24, you get 12 and a half. Almost, because we don't even follow that much closely. That's a little bit different than in practice. You're not staying on that 12 and a half santoor. But that's one of the major differences. Next, please. So, what's in red is what we can use and in Eastern classical music, and the Western classical music does not have it. You all have half notes, which are the difference between the two keys in the piano, black and white, black and white. And then you have whole notes, and you have 1.5 notes, which would be like, that's half, that I have this, you don't have, that's full, that's 1.5. But for us, we have actually some sounds between those half steps. Understood? Quick, thank you. That's the hardest part to explain, really. Very hard to explain, but that's the easiest way I could create. Go to the next slide, please. Now, from now on, we're going to have more of the scales to play and show you what they are. If you pick the other 2 notes on the left side on that wall, such that there is 4 unit, 4 unit, 2 unit. This one is always 4. We talked about 4 and 5 always fixed. And then on the other side, exactly like that, 4, 4, 2. 4, 4, 2, then you're in a major scale. And that sounds something like this. Or, depends on which floor are you on. 1 floor higher, 1 floor lower. The same frequencies. You can feel that they are all the same. So here, for us, it is actually, we call it major or mahul. And I can play a little bit on mahul for you. But before I do that, I want to show you some other differences. The second difference is that, amazingly, the Western classical music is developed based on play. It's like every note there is a character in a theater. And every one of them has their own role. There is a teacher, there is a doctor, there is a student, there is a worker, and they remain, they hold that character throughout. And that's the way they relay the message, by playing their roles. So the first note is very important, then the 5th note, and the 4th note, and the 8th note, next important, and so forth. And then when you're done with listening to a piece of classical music, then you are done with seeing it's like a playing in front of you. Every note did their own job. That's not the case for us. First of all, our scales are based on 4 notes or 5 notes, and combination of 4 and 5, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the remaining would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from 1 to 4, and that. And then we can use combination of different 5s and different 4s and mix and match it. And when you do that, you get several different form of scales that creates different mood, ambience, that does not exist in Western classical music. So, if I play for you Mahur, the note, that's number 1, that's the bass, plays a little bit, does its job in a piece, we call it dang. You play that dang or Magham. When you're done with that dang or Magham, then it transfers its importance to the next note, goes to the second note of the scale. Then that becomes important. It plays, creates its own environment, then passes it to the third one, to the fourth one, to the fifth one, and goes all along to the last one, which usually we call ode. Now, another difference is that all of the music in Western culture is based on fixed beats. You have measures of different beats, but we don't. And most of our music is actually as avaz, which is a beat free, and that remains the most important part of my understanding of the music in Persian, because then it gives the player pleasure of playing it differently each time. Because you can now, there's no measure, you can actually increase sum of notes, decrease sum of notes, and create so many different versions of the same thing. And that's why we have about 288 of these little pieces of what we call dang, of 4 notes or 5 notes, throughout the centuries, which was put together 100 years ago to 5 or 6 different systems, which I'm going to show you right now. But then each time, you use that as a base, and then you can change it. And that's so beautiful. From 288 pieces, like a brick and cement and so forth, to make a different building. Each time, it feels different, it sounds a little bit different. So that's the last part. Having said that, I'm going to play you a few things in Mahur. And I pass from the torch from the first one to the second one to the fourth and fifth one, just as an example. This is how our major scale, but real Mahur would sound. I can play in this as much as I want, but when I'm done, short or long, then I pass it to the second note. Now, instead of this note being the magnet and absorb all the other ones to itself, to be the most important note, now we are going to give it to the second note. See how it differs. I play first one first and then go to the second one again. You're bringing everything to a different note now than when you started. It takes you somewhere else. And then to show that you're still in the same scale, they use what we call an ending figure that fixes throughout this system that I'm playing, and it brings you back to the base and say, hey, we're still here, and then let it go to the next one. And then you play there and then you come back, hey, we are still. And that ends like this. Now we're back into the first note. Now you can go